Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our second session in the series, Merging with Infinity, Finding Meaning in the Light of Death with Tim Freke. Tim Freke has an honors degree in philosophy, is an internationally respected authority on world spirituality. He is the author of over 30 books that have established his reputation as a scholar and free thinker. He's been featured in documentaries broadcast by the BBC and the History Channel. He blogs for the Huffington Post and is the founder of the Alliance for Lucid Living. Tim has been exploring these deep mysteries for many years. I think it has been, since I've known you, Tim, it's been the focus of your life, and I would like to know what started you on this journey.
Oh, that's. I think life itself, Robin, is the answer to that one. I often think of what a philosopher is somebody who doesn't really grow up, and so I sort of always had that childlike sense of mystery. I mean, what I love about what you're doing is this, you call it the great mystery, which obviously has strong resonances with a lot of the indigenous traditions, but it's also a statement of what life is. And we're face to face with it right now. And life and indeed death point constantly towards that great mystery. So for me, as a child, it just felt incredible that all the grown-ups seemed to be pretending they knew what was going on when clearly none of them did. And I couldn't sit with that. I felt like life itself was some huge question, and there must be some huge answer, and it wasn't good enough to just pretend, and it wasn't good enough just to go along with it. I really wanted to know, and on top of that, of course, life is full of not only exquisite beauty, but also terrible suffering. And I think growing up, I started to see that I needed to redeem it. I needed to know, is it all right? Why is there this suffering? Albert Einstein, one of my great heroes, once said in a beautiful line that the most important question before humanity is the universe friendly? And that captures it completely, I think, that sense of, what is this a safe place? Is it all right what's happening here? There's bad things, but is it all right? And that, I think, is what motivated me and led in my own personal journey through, what, I don't really know why, to a spontaneous awakening when I was a young boy at about the age of 12. So that I I entered this awakened state, which I've been exploring all my life ever since. Didn't even stay in it, but I certainly went deeply into it, and found that a lot of the answers, the deep answers I was looking for, were not answered by words. They were answered actually by a state of consciousness, by something before words, by realization, or what the ancients were called gnosis, or knowing. And I stumbled into it, into this deep awake state, and when I was very small, and that really that was the seed of my life. And everything which has come since then, the studies, the books, the exploration, and the personal journey, working with death, has been a playing out of that realization that I had when I was a kid, when I was adult.
What a profound experience to have at 12.
Yeah, and I didn't know what it was, and partly that was the joy of it, really, Robin, because I wasn't I wasn't in a church, I wasn't doing meditation, I was just on a hill looking over my sleepy little hometown in the southwest of England where I grew up, questioning just in the mystery, and found myself transported quite unexpectedly into this state of consciousness in which everything was one. And there was this profound interconnectedness with everything. And the thing that really struck me, I think, the thing which actually I experienced when I was 12 was love. This incredible love. Like the whole universe is just pulsating with love. And I can remember the relief and the tears and the feeling of coming home. It's just like, oh my God. And a certainty. The only thing I found that was sure, I felt certain that this was the most real thing I'd ever found. And that while it didn't actually really answer any questions, they all dissolved into it, so that there was a knowing which was bigger than the questions, much bigger. And that has become, I think, in terms of my understanding with words, and I hope it's changed, and I hope I've got wiser, and I've lived a life, and I've suffered some bruises, and I've got through into my 50s. But that essential realization has traveled with me since I was very young, that there is a state in which you can know something, and that's what we really look for.
Yes, and it seems that somehow in that state, when we can open up and find a little more spaciousness, it gives us a little more capacity to be with all the things that are going on.
No, yes, absolutely. I mean, because life is a pretty scary thing, and what you find in that knowing, in that gnosis, as the ancients called it, is something safe. You find this absolute safety right in the middle of all of the fear, right in the middle of all of the struggle. And that's why it's so important to the question we've come together to discuss tonight, which is death. Because the place that I always want to start, I mean, I'm a philosopher. I have lots of ideas that I'd like to share, and I've been specifically working around with death since I was in my 20s, but I have to start with a mystery. I have to start with, look, at the end of the day, it feels to me that no ideas are going to do it. When we're face to face with such a profound mystery as death, it doesn't matter what somebody says to me or what I say to others. The one thing we need to find is that is a realization within. It's that gnosis, that place where you go, aha, I see. Okay, the universe is friendly. It's that that moment where you go, I get it, and that isn't an idea. So the ideas we're going to share today, for me, they're all trying to point to the mystery, but a benign mystery. They're all pointing to that place where you can get it, and then suddenly you're able to be in these situations, like being around great suffering, in a different way, and we can explore what how different, and as we I hope we'll get a chance to do that.
I think, and maybe, it's these experiences of suffering and of loss that kind of catapult us into the journey of trying to understand the mystery. And that when we can get a bigger context, because some things just don't make sense, like a child dying, or someone dying before their time, or what we would think of, or in a way that doesn't make sense, drive-by shooting, or just whatever, there's no way, I mean, I remember, you have this sense, well, I had this sense growing up, like you grow up and you live a life and you die, and so the people that die are in general old. This was from a young person's perspective. And then all of a sudden somebody your age, something that doesn't fit that pattern, which happened to me. And then it totally blows open, well, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So what does that mean then? And starts this investigation.
Absolutely. I mean, I see us, we're walking around, most of us, within a kind of like this, kind of a narrow bandwidth of experience, and we think, we kind of pretend that we know what's going on, that what life is, and we have it within safe parameters to try and keep the mystery out because we're scared of it. But sooner or later something happens and boom, you're out, and then you're face to face with it. And death does that more than anything. I mean, I've been around personal loss a fair bit, and I've been around other people who've been touched by death a lot, and I see it all the time. It's just like boom, wow, suddenly you're in a different world, because you can't miss the mystery of death. It's too big. It's it is a shamanic experience just to be around it. It's an awakening experience. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. So it becomes a gateway. It doesn't have to be death, of course. It could be birth, could be falling in love, could be music, could be the sun on your back, could be like nothing at all. It could be, it can happen at any time. It doesn't have to be a bad thing or a difficult thing or suffering, but it does do that, and that's one of the roles it plays. Which is why I think in the mystic traditions, which I've studied and written, a lot of books on, all these different spiritual traditions, I hear these themes again and again, and one is clearly around death. And one of the things which you hear is that death is a doorway. That to live with the remembrance of death makes you realize how important life is. And I think most of us know that. I mean, I remember when I started counseling people who are bereaved, I had a group of young people who'd all lost somebody. They were all in their teenagers. And I myself was only in my early 20s. And I would go and I'd drive to this local city and I'd be with them and we'd have an amazing time together. And then every night when I got home, I'd have to ring up my mum and dad and just tell them I loved them. Often it was very late. I'm sure I was waking them up, but it was like, I had to do it because you suddenly get this sense of, oh my God, it's so important. And there's this magic which death has, which
Yes.
is itself curious, I think, and interesting. Because you look at it one way and you'd think, well, it should be or it could be just a very negative thing. But it has a magic whereby it reminds you of what matters, and for nearly everyone, it turns out that what matters is love.
Yes.
Now, so death and love are very close because death reveals love, and isn't that interesting? So this thing which is on the one hand the most terrible of things, pain, suffering, and loss, awful heartbreak, actually inside of all of that one thing, it's like yin and yang, you come inside, and inside there's the opposite. There's awakening and love and transformation. And that, I think, that's a very deep thing to contemplate.
Yes. You know, I've been, well, in the last, year and a half, I've really been contemplating death. And I would like to see the language change around it, because I think, we separate life and death, and really there isn't a separation. Not in the bigger context.
A very wise old lady who's 80-something that I know, she's Jungian in America. She said something which her teacher had said to her. It's a quite an obvious thing. I've heard it a few times now, but it's a lovely, deep thing, which is very simple. She says, "Look, she said to me, look, the opposite of life, of death is not of life is not death. These are not the opposites. The opposite of death is birth. It's all life."
Yes, that's beautiful,
isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, the opposite of death is birth.
Yes, that makes so much sense, because it feels like death is a birth into another realm.
Yeah, that all the opposites, I think, contain each other.
Yeah.
That's one of the great centers of the philosophy I call paralogical philosophy, understanding the paradox of existence. And yeah, that life and death are interchangeable. This is part of the ancient tradition. And one of the things I loved about studying the ancient pagan mysteries and the Gnostic mysteries was this idea that you get very clearly there, and you get it in shamanic traditions too sometimes, which is that we're already dead, that this is death. And in the ancient mysteries, this is Hades. This is the land of shadows. If you think about the very famous metaphor in Plato writes about it, there's Plato's cave. It's actually a Pythagorean metaphor, so it's probably Pythagoras' cave, really, and he got it from Egypt, so it's probably. But anyway, the metaphor, for those that don't know it, it's a very famous one in the ancient world, is the idea that we are in that we are like people in a cave, and we are mistaking the shadows on the wall for reality. But really, it's the light being shone into the cave. And that if we want reality, we have to leave the cave and we'll walk into the light, and it's not the shadows. And they saw this as Hades, the shadows, the shades, the cave. And what they're saying is, look, we're caught up in the appearance of things, whereas if we look in the opposite direction, if we look at what's look at what's illuminating this, then we can resurrect, as the Christians say, we can come back to life. And that's leaving the cave, and then you suddenly find out, that this is where we're asleep. This is where we're half dead. And if you look at us, you look at us on Monday morning. There's going to be happening soon. Is people streaming to work, and you go, oh my God, we really are. We're living in the land of the half dead, because we're also and the idea there is very much look the death is the point where you wake up. And that's a very interesting, I think, old but interesting perspective, that death could be waking up.
Yes, I think it is. I think you're right. I loved what you wrote about, what was it, the dark light of consciousness, the dark,
Yes,
yes,
the Sufis call it the dark light,
yeah,
and the Gnostic Christians refer to it as the dazzling darkness, which is
hmm
lovely, I think, isn't it? It's
yes,
got this idea that is that is awareness in itself.
hmm
That what's arising from that is this dream of life. I mean, maybe what I can do is share with you a very old analogy, which I've reworked in a very modern way, which I think is very powerful. This awakening, which I glimpsed when I was a young boy, and I've been exploring ever since, and I know you've been exploring, and there's so many of us now trying to penetrate into what it is and share it with each other. It seems to me that one of the ways of describing it, I spent a period in my life of just really trying to write a very short book, which I did. I wrote a book called Lucid Living, which people can see on my website. It's a very short book in which I tried to just say what this is in as just as directly as possible, and not in a way that you had to believe anything, in a way that you could just look and see it for yourself as you read the book. So
hmm
it was completely experiential. And the idea that I used was that the awakened state is like lucid dreaming, but now. Because this experience we're having right now, this experience of thinking and feeling and colors and sensations and computers and this is everything, is actually much more like a dream than we normally notice. And that just as in a dream, you can enter a state where you're consciously dreaming, you're lucidly dreaming. So right now, you can enter a state where you're consciously living and you're lucid living. And in that place, you start to recognize the paradox of this moment and your identity just as you can see it in a dream. And what I mean by that, Robin, and I think, and this will be really pertinent for our discussions of what death is or might be or how we can understand it,
hmm
is that what you can see when you think of it as a dream is just how paradoxical your nature is. Because in a dream, you are both in it and it's in you
hmm
at the same time. And on the one hand, you're a character in a dream doing dream stuff. And on the other hand, you're the dreamer. You're
hmm
not in the dream. The dream is in you. You don't have any form. All the forms are in you. You are the awareness within which the whole dream is arising. And then in the dream, you're one character going about your dreams, and it may be a nightmare, or it may be a wish-fulfilling fantasy, or it might be just boring. But it will have a reality, and it will have a meaning to it, and it will seem like it's really there, and it will matter from that perspective.
hmm
But come to this other perspective, and you're the dreamer, and you're everything. You're not just that one character, you're the whole dream. It's all you. You're not separate from anything. And it's all fine. Even when it's the worst nightmare, it's a nightmare in the dream, that's for real.
hmm
But outside, it's a dream. It's okay. It's okay. Why? Because you're completely safe.
hmm
How could you be hurt? You're not in the dream. The dream's in you. And this awakening, which I've been exploring, is the same in a way, but now. So that what you're discovering is that right now there is this polarity to my nature. There's first of all, there's Tim, who's this object, this person in the world,
hmm
but my subjective nature is the opposite. The thing I call I is awareness itself,
hmm
and it has no form. It has no form. It's what's looking, but you can't see it.
hmm
It's what's listening, but you can't hear it. It is not, and it's nowhere to be found. It looks like it's in my head, but it's not in my head. There's just clever porridge in my head. It's where? It's not in this. Just like a dreamer is not in a dream, because it's the other way around. And you
hmm
start seeing this is what the ancients have been pointing to. This is what all of the spiritual traditions come down to at their depths. Is look, you are not a thing. You are your spirit, which means essence, from SA to be. Your
hmm
being, your spirit, your being is actually awareness itself. It's the mind, it's the presence within which this is arising like a dream. And you're in it, like Tim's in it, and you're not in it. It's in you at the same time. And you miss this one. You see this one, but you miss this one because you're living like this. But when you go, whoa, you see this one. This is still here. It's just still Tim. He's still here. And Tim's one amongst many. He's a separate little person, and he's, you know, he's doing his Tim thing. And some days it's a nightmare, and some days it's heaven on earth. And you never know which it's going to be when you wake up. Could be either. But here, I'm completely safe. Here in this bigger place, I'm complete, really, because I'm not in it. And what you find, and the Gnostics call this, and this is particularly pertinent to what we're talking about today, they call that the discovery of your unbornness, which is a fantastic phrase. And what they're saying is, look, you find you're safe because you can't possibly die. And the reason you can't possibly die is you weren't ever born. What's born, you know, Tim got born, and Tim will die, because that's in the dream of life. But what I am, that deep self, that's never been in this. That's like dying in a dream. It's like that just is, which is why I think every one of us has that. You know, it's a funny quirk, isn't it? But it's actually impossible to imagine not being. You can't imagine that you don't exist. It's impossible.
Probably because we will always. Do you think that what you're describing about the dreamer and the dream is similar in a way to when people have near-death experiences? You know, because they experience, you know, this incredible love and presence and things, but they don't have. But it's not them in the body. It's this other aspect of them, this deeper, the unbornness, maybe.
Yeah, well, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or actually it's Liberation Through Hearing is the proper title for it, it's the idea there is very much that the light which people all, you know, describe being drawn to and coming to in these beautiful, inspiring near-death experiences is your own deeper nature. That is the Buddha nature, and that is your deeper self that you are encountering, because there is only one of us. Because ultimately, if you go back far enough, there's one of us, and you can call that Buddha nature or God or Atman or any damn thing you want. But there's one of us, and that we are one thing appearing as many things. And of course, that's why, you know, we have that every night when we dream. You know, when I dream at night, I'm one thing appearing as many things. It's just I think I'm the one person in the dream, but I'm the whole thing. And the waking up seems to be pointing us back further and further and further and further to this place where there's one of us. And when we go back there, there's this incredible love. And the reason that there's this incredible love is because love is how oneness feels. When you experience oneness with anyone, you know, with your lover, when you feel one with them, you love them, or your child, or your friend, or an activity, or the day, or whatever. You're one with it, there's love. And so what happens when you discover that you're one with everything? There's a very big love. And that's when you go, oh my God, I'm a fish swimming in love. How did I not notice that? And that's the revelation. That's the thing which I find really, really inspiring, and why I listen very closely to people who tell me about their near-death experiences. Is it because although it's different, it's kind of has another dimensional quality to it. The actual visceral thing, the thing they find, the love and the feeling they bring back, is just like what happened to me on the hill, and has happened to me a million times since. You know, I've never had a near-death experience, but I know exactly what they're talking about, because it's the same revelation, and it's the same feeling then of safety. I found some in the middle of all of this danger, which is life is dangerous, isn't it, and scary. It just is. And in the center of it all, there's something profoundly safe. Another little thing. Let me just tell you this little one. But the one little thing which again I love from studying the Gnostic Christians was that you could see that in the original Christian tradition, this thing you see on countless billboards of, you know, you need to be saved. Actually, if you go back to the Greek that the Gospels are written in, it's not actually that. It's really saying you need to discover that you are safe. You need to wake up to the Christ within you, which is the oneness, to know that you are safe. And there's a Gnostic gospel called the Gospel of Thomas, which is, people who are listening to this don't know it. I really recommend it if you're interested in some really great scripture. called and in the Gospel of Thomas, which is arguably one of the earliest Gospels we have, you get this incredible moment where this figure of Jesus is teaching people this gnosis, this safety. And he says exactly what we discussed earlier. I will show you something which you cannot see, you cannot hear, you cannot touch, and you cannot imagine. And he's pointing to, waking up to, the formless nature of our being. That our being, like a dreamer, has no form, because everything that has form is in the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, and it's very pertinent, that those who understand my sayings will not taste death. Which is a great bit of salesmanship, I always think.
Yes.
I want to buy that book. Really?
Yes.
But you can see what he's doing. The idea there, same idea you get in all these traditions. Look, find this thing within you, and you will find the safety within the fear. Find the thing within you, and you will find this formlessness within which the forms are arising. Find the thing within you, and you will find that you already have eternal life because you were never born. Because what you really are is the dreamer of this dream. And what you're going through right now is a life experience, and what you will return to is a deeper essence of what you are.
It feels so important for us, not only looking at like death of the body, but there's so many kinds of death. Death of relationship, death of our identity, like if we lose a position with a job or something, and to really have perhaps a practice to help keep these ideas.
One of the things which I just love is seeing. I love the commonalities of human experience, and I love it with these different spiritual traditions where you can just look through them and go, "Hang on, this is the same damn thing." And the thing, I think St. Paul is the most famous version in our Western tradition. Die daily.
Yes.
It's a great practice. I mean, if there's a practice, I mean, once you realize that what you're trying to do to wake up is be conscious of your unbornness, to be conscious of the part of you that can't die, the part of you that always is, something which has no form. It's like, well, in the morning, you come out of the void and you wake up. I wake up and I'm Tim, and I'm like, oh, this strange stuff is happening again. And it's like, number one on my to-do list, die. Just come back out and be that big presence. And it's also a way of confronting the biggest fear, because we're all held back, all of us. Life is very scary. I think terribly scary. But if we can confront the big ones straight off and go, okay, well, that one's all right, actually, then suddenly the smaller ones are much more manageable. And I feel that can give us the courage to enter into the fact that, as you said, the Buddha said before you, the life is impermanent.
Yes.
Like everything, your job will go, your kids will grow up, your body will get old, your talents will leave you. You will constantly gain new things, and the price of that is you will lose old things, and that is the way it is. And that's a great joy, and it's a great sorrow, both.
Yes, one of the things that had a big impact on me was, and I forget exactly where I read it, but the Tibetans, how they feel that all fears are ultimately linked to the fear of death. So it's like you're saying, if we can get rid of that one.
Yeah, and if the fear of death turns out to be, if we were to be able to see that death is not worth fearing, or that it's not what we think it is, then that really would change the whole gambit of how we live our lives, wouldn't it?
Yes.
If we were able to see that, and that's why I think people like Plato, Socrates said the whole of philosophy is a meditation on death, because that's the thing. We need to pay that attention. There's a line I came across just the other day. I must admit I've forgotten who said it, but it was lovely, which is just said, "Death is certain, the timing is uncertain. So what's important now?" And just to wake up with that in the morning, death is certain, the timing is uncertain. So what's important now? To get that sense of urgency and appreciation of the moment from knowing what a treasure it is, because otherwise you just, if you've been around death, I'm sure you must have seen it too, is that often we wait till the end to suddenly realize how much we want to be alive.
Or how much we really want somebody to know that we love them, or that we forgive them, or that.
Especially that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big part. I mean, it's one of the things is to make sure that we finish our business, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as people say, that ability to go out and go, look, if there's things which you need to do them. Don't put them off. Do them now. Do them.
Mm-hmm.
Do them straight away. You know, there's things that, you know, do them today. As soon as we finish this, go do them. Because, you know, you just don't know. You really don't. And one can't help feeling that that's not an accident. You know, I must admit that sometimes I really wish that I knew when I was going to die. It'd make it easier to make some decisions about things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it worth starting this new book? Well, only if I'm going to live long enough, you know, or whatever it is. You know, it's like, do I need to plan for a retirement, or am I going to be gone way before that? If I knew, it would be handy. But the fact that I don't know, that feels like, oh, that's important, isn't it? That's part of what life wants me to be in. Wants me to be in that place of uncertainty and maybe with the safety that we've got, you know, that we've been put into modern life, that we do expect now, most of us, to live till old age, has decreased that in some way, that sense of living with death.
I was just thinking about, you know, if you knew when you were going to die, how if you knew that, then if you knew, let's say you were going to die in a year, then you might not write the book because, oh, it would just be getting published or at the printer or whatever, you know, and not knowing, and then who knows what effect it's going to have.
I know, it's a clever little trick, isn't it?
It is a clever little trick. But I love that exercise you have in your book on finishing business. I thought that was so good because even if we live a long time, finishing it and keeping that present about, you know, everything you want to say or do, doing it is liberating.
Yeah, yeah. This is where I think, you know, death. My real focus on death came in my early 20s for me, Robin, and I spent a year pretty much doing nothing but meditating and doing Tai Chi and inner processing, you know, and I was having a wonderful time. And I was a lot of love, and you know, and I was living in this little pink cottage by a river, and it was idyllic. And as the thing about love and why it's so important, I think, is because love demands to be shared. So it wasn't enough that I was here having a nice time. It just had to be shared. I thought, well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to be of service with this? I was a young guy, and I thought, well, where does no one else want to go? And I thought, well, maybe I should volunteer to do some work with people who are dying. And I was interested in dying because some of my teachers taught around it, and I also was intrigued. Would this love that would it all dry up? Would I just go, oh God, you know, was I experiencing this deep, whatever it was, because I was young, healthy, living in a little pink cottage by a river, with no worries to speak of because there was no responsibilities or anything, or was there something real there? And that's what pulled me into, and I began a journey where I ended up working with people who were dying and grieved, was that actually I found it increased it. That to be around people who are facing such a big thing in their lives is not only difficult and heartbreaking, but when the heart breaks, then something amazing comes out. And it was a privilege and humbling to be with people. And my experience is that the people who are themselves facing death become, in many cases, quite transformed and shamanic, if you could say. And the people around them also become like the people who are, especially when someone leaves, it really does feel like there's a tear in the fabric of space and time. And people who are near that hole are illuminated. Often they themselves are in states of immense distress, and yet, as well as the distress, there's something more comes through them, and there's a power and there's an awakening happening around them. And
yes,
very, very noticeable to me.
Which is a wonderful experience, and I think being around people that are making their transition is, in a way, not only do you get high from that, but it like is giving you that experience of the you know, of eternity.
Yeah.
In a way, of the whole continuation of that there's only life.
Yeah.
And this is just another, it's death on this side and birth on another.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can have a go. I don't know if you can indulge me with this. This is not something I talk about very much, and it's not something which I've done anything like this with. But I have written about it in my little book, this one, How Long Is Now, which is quite a personal book, and I ended talking about death and describing an experience of kind of one of those moments whereby my meditations on death, which have been going on for decades, and really not getting anywhere, to be honest. Suddenly there was like a koan, an explosion of, oh my God, a visceral feeling of seeing something more than I was looking for. And I'm still drawn by it, and I do like to be able to share it, to see how, to give people to see what they make of it. And because what I've seen is that there are all these different ideas about death in the spiritual literature. Are we going to go to heaven? Or is it all going to be great? Or are we going to get reincarnated back here unless we're liberated and enlightened and it's just a circle? Or things that Socrates said, or the shamanic teachings are different again. And then you've got the near-death experiences and what they show us. And then how does all that fit together? Or is there just the beginnings of a glimmering of an understanding which can kind of make sense of these different things? And I was thinking about the thing I said earlier about how, well, it came actually from a gentleman who came to one of my seminars, my retreats, and he said to me once, he said, Tim, he said, if life is like a dream, what happens when you die? And I said, I don't know. I said, have you ever died in a dream? And he said, yeah, I have. I said, really, what happened? He said, I woke up. Oh, he said, maybe I've answered my question. And it was a lovely moment, because the whole went round the room and everyone was going, yeah, I died in a dream and I woke up too. And it was a great moment. It was funny. But meditating on it over many years, I've begun to feel that there's something very deep in that joke, in that playfulness. And that this metaphor that you find in, all the Zen masters say it, Paul says it, Gnostics say it, the Taoists say it, the Sufis say it, the shamanics say it, life is like a dream. And it's my experience right now that it really is. So the idea that, okay, so when we die, can we understand the nature of life with this analogy and the nature of death? And I think maybe we can, because the awakening that happens when we're lucid takes you to that place where you're touching the edge of something, like when you dream lucidly. You don't wake up. You're right on the edge of waking up, but you're still dreaming. And when we become lucid in life, we're right on the edge, but you're still alive. And what you touch is this profound state of oneness, where everything is one as well as separate. And with that comes this incredible love. And what I hear from the people who go through near-death experiences is that they start heading towards that. They're drawn towards that, and this incredible love and peace and beauty. And that's my experience now. If you touch this, you can begin to feel that. And so my sense is that when we wake up, what we're waking up to is a higher dimension of what we are. There's a lovely line in the Gospels which is a bizarre line, really, that Jesus says, "Don't you know your gods?" And it's like, really? Did he say? It's like, that's not Christian, is it? But it's in there. And in the ancient traditions, you get this whole thing is that you are really a god. So when I talked earlier about this being death, this being Hades, the idea is that you are really a god, but you are asleep or dead, and then you will resurrect and wake up, and you will be a god. And that that Robin and Tim are both sleeping gods, whatever, or a daemon, they call them often as well. So you get this idea that there's a deeper level to who we are. Now, what intrigues me about that is think about dreaming, because when we dream at night, you really think you're the person in the dream. You think you're just that. You've got no idea about the waking world, and you've got no idea about all the other dreams you've had. All thousands and thousands of these dreams, but you don't know any of them. You're just in that one. And yet when you wake up, you know that there was a deeper level to your identity, way beyond the person you were just dreaming yourself to be, and that whole adventure, which seemed so important, was a small fragment of who you are. And not only that, but that you have dreamed again and again and again and again and again, and that some were really important and some were not so much, and some were really awful and some were really great, and that all of them showed you something about who you are, and that you had to dream, that you could only sustain being awake by going to sleep every night, that you couldn't do it otherwise, that you had to enter this other state to sustain this state. Well, what about if it's the same? What about if it's the same? That we have to do this. We have to do to dream that we are separate in order to experience that we are one. And that what we're describing with life and death is very similar. That when we're here right now, we don't know anything about that. We know this. We think this is it. I'm Tim. That's who I am. But actually, when I wake up from this dream of life, I will see that I have been many Tims and will be many different Tims, and not just Tims, of course, but many that I will have, that I will live many lives, just like I dream many dreams. But that what I am is being shown what it is through all of these different experiences. But that what I am is really, really one with what is. And what I love about that vision is it ties in so many things for me. So obviously, reincarnation, the idea that you're coming back, but not as some punishment. You know, you don't dream at night as a punishment. So, oh, Tim, you've been such a bad person. You can't stay awake forever. You've got to go to sleep. No, I go to sleep because it's natural. It's natural to sleep because I need to sleep to stay awake. Well, what about if it's natural to live because you need to live to experience the oneness of the thing which exists before life and before death. We need this in order to experience that, in the same way that we need to sleep to order to experience this. And that is what we call reincarnation. And that what waking up is a moment of entering the light, which is love, which is heavenly, of course. That's going, oh, do you know what? That was all a dream. It may have been an awful nightmare in which I was a terrible person, but it's all a dream. And it was showing me something. That's not who I am. And it accounts also for my personal experiences of being around people dying, where I just felt like you see, oh my God, that was who you were. My dad. I thought you were this. But now you're dying, and I see you are this huge being. And when I relate to my dad now, it feels like I'm relating to the imagination from which my dad arose. So much of which my dad is a small fragment. So much more than that. And it also accounts for me of Socrates. His great thing was he said again, you know, that people fear death because they think it's forgetting. But death is remembering. Here is forgetting. And again, you just think, yeah, that's right, isn't it? Because here we forget so much, like in a dream. You know, when you wake up, you know, how much do you remember in a dream? Nothing. Don't remember anything of this. But when you wake up, you remember so much more. I remember this dream and that dream and that dream. I remember But to wake up fully and to remember all of it, and then you look at the near-death experience, and that's what people describe. Actually remembering their life, really remembering the whole thing in the life review. But from a different perspective, almost like you do when you wake up from a dream and go, what was that about? Wow, what did you dream? Wow, what did you live? Really? Oh my God, that's incredible. And just that, so suddenly you've got, yeah, it's heaven, it's reincarnation, it's remembering, it's oneness, and then finally, just to throw in one which I like, is this idea which I got from a shaman who came and stayed with me for a while, from Guatemala. And he said at one stage, I was talking about death, and he said, my teacher he'd been in his 80s. He said he's a great man, and when he died, he was a ripe fruit to be eaten by the gods. And it was a bit freaky, to be honest. Like, really? Okay, it's almost like a consciousness farm. You know, it's like, oh, there's a one, very nice, which is a bit spooky. But what I feel is what he was saying was, look, the same as the ancients, that we are deeper beings than this, and that our lives feed our depths. The God that we are, the essence that we are, is fed by a life well lived. just as I'm fed by a night well dreamt. That when I wake up in the morning and it's been a good night's sleep, I'm alive and I feel good and I'm ready for the day and I'm ready to live. In the same way that the waking up from a life well lived feeds our deepest being, our soul, and that's why we do it. And there's something about that vision which holds everything together for me in a deep and resonant way, and that's why I love to share.
You know, when you were describing this, I had this image of like a diamond or some kind of stone, and our lives in the physical form were all like different facets.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know,
That's a very beautiful image, and one that you find at the heart of Buddhism. In the pagan Neoplatonist tradition, you get this idea that God is a face made up of a million faces, which is beautiful again. So that what we're coming back to is a place where we are still individual, yet we know that we are ultimately all one, like facets on the diamond, or as Rumi says, holes in the lampshade through which the one light shines.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful.
And then how does it change how we live if we know that? How does it change how we live if we can go, look, this, the universe is a friendly place. And my feeling is the great thing about discovering this safety, which comes from the waking up to the deep self, is that we can dare to take the risk to live. And that involves being able to step into the scary maelstrom of life. And I run these mystery experience retreats, Robin, in around the world, and especially here in England. And my whole aim and is to take a group of however 20, 30, 40, 50 people and give them this experience, not as an idea, but as a visceral experience, so they can just feel the oneness, they can feel the love in their body, in the cells in their body, so they get that safety, so they get that, oh yeah, I'm home, oh, this is home, oh my God. Because once you taste that, it feels, then you can take the risk. Not to just disappear off there, but go, okay, but you're not dead. You're now alive. So really live. Actually engage with the adventure. Actually make the hero's journey. You are the hero of this story on a life journey. Go for it. Just go for it. Be alive and see what happens. Because as I remember Ram Dass saying once to me, what's the worst that can happen? You can die, and that doesn't matter.
And that's going to happen anyway, so you might as
well.
Anyway,
so
exactly.
It just
Go
changes, doesn't it? It just changes.
It does.
But also, I just want to just say, just because I've got enthusiastic and one can be misleading with that, but because I also feel that it's very important with death, as with all of the things in life. When I say, look, life is scary, I mean life is scary. And I really want to honor the other part of me. There's this big safe part, but there's this vulnerable Tim, and he's very vulnerable, and I can be devastated, when the deaths that have happened close to me, it's very sad, and your heart breaks, and there's a grief is an intense experience, and we all have that. So what I am exploring with this awakening is not get rid of this, wake up to that, lose all fear, just be safe. For me, that's not it. It's not, be liberated from suffering. It's rather be in both. Know the safety, take the risk. Know the place where there's peace, also know the place where there's passion. And therefore, my feeling is, when we suffer ourselves and when we're with people who are suffering, to really, is compassion. It's about compassion, to really reach out to each other and hold each other's hand. And it's not about that kind of spiritual dismissal that, it's not about. And to realize it doesn't make it all right. I mean, when my father was dying a couple of years ago, being with my dad, he'd had a stroke, and he was lying in bed, and he'd be there for 6 months, and he could move one arm a little bit, and he could hardly speak, and when he did speak, he would just go, help me, help me, help me. And, it was really hard. And I'd go and visit him and stay with him, and it was shit. It was shit, and it didn't matter how much I meditated and how awake I was, or it was shit. It was not going to be anything else, you know. And I wanted it to be. That's the thing. What I saw in that, I didn't want to be sitting there going, you know, well, I'm enlightened, Dad, and if you'd only meditated like me, you'd be having a better time, or it's just your karma, or don't worry, it's all unreal and it's an illusion. All of that's bullshit. I wanted to suffer with my dad because he was my dad. But what I found was that I could be in a place where I was authentically with him in the suffering with him. But there was also a place where it was okay at the same time, and that the okay place didn't take away the suffering. They sat together like yin and yang. They were both present. And that when they were both present, there was a sort of beauty. Do you know what I mean? The kind of magic. That in the middle of all the suffering, there was something beautiful would happen. And it was still suffering, it was still awful, but it wasn't just awful. And there was this incredible love that would hold the joy and the suffering together. The love was big enough to hold them both. It didn't need to dismiss either of them. It would hold them both. And then magic happened, and we had amazing times together in the middle of what was awful. And so I feel very human now. I feel very vulnerable. And I'm willing to be vulnerable, and I like to be with people who are willing to be vulnerable and real about their humanity. I hate spiritual dismissal of our humanity. I can't be doing with it anymore. I like to be able to meet in that real place.
It feels like, you know, having that experience of our oneness and the whole experience of life actually allows us to be open so that we can feel the love and the suffering instead of closing down.
Yeah.
You know, because I remember something else Ram Dass said was, you know, how do I keep my heart open, you know, amidst the suffering? And I think
keep my heart open in hell. That was one of his lines, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's the key that you were just talking about, is being in both places.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. And so that I think when I started on the journey, when I was younger, I kind of thought that I would go to this place where I was always in one, just always, and that there were people who were always, and that if I meditated enough, I'd be one of them.
Yeah.
And now I've met an awful lot of amazing people, and not one of them is like that. And the people I find most attractive are the people who are actually authentically human. Which means being willing to live in a world which is scary and full of ups and downs, and to know that, you know, you can be turned inside out in a moment's notice with the terrible things like you mentioned, the death of a child or anything. You know, it can just go, whoa, you know, like you. And yet there's also at the same time this incredible gnosis, this knowledge that what we are is much bigger than all of it, and that everything is actually okay. It's not okay, and it's okay. Just like in a dream. Just like in a dream. If you're in a dream and it happens to be a nightmare, it is not okay, but it's also okay. The difference is that when I use the dream metaphor, I don't mean this is an illusion in that negative sense. For years, Robin, you'll understand this because I know you understand the shamanic traditions. But you know, for years, I wouldn't use the dream analogy because we think, in the West, we tend to think of dreams as irrelevant illusions. So when you say life is a dream, people think you're saying life is an irrelevant illusion. What that actually shows us is how wrong we are about dreams. Because you went to an old culture and you went, what's a dream? They would not describe it as an irrelevant illusion. They regard it as something deep and meaningful and important. And you'd want to know, what are your dreams? Whereas we just go, oh, it's just nonsense. So I mean it in that ancient sense, that the dream of life is meaningful, hugely important and revelatory. We need to enter into it. When it's awful, it truly is awful. When it's good, it truly is good. And it is not what it seems. And therefore it is also always okay. And you will come out of it, whatever it's been, and you will have learned through the experience of being alive.
Yes.
Like you learn from the experience of dreaming.
You know, going back to when you were talking about being with your father when he passed, I think also when we can be in that experience of in both places, knowing the greater whole, um, and being there with the suffering, it also creates space for the one who is dying so that they don't have to feel guilty about leaving.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that in our culture there's been this thing where death is a failure.
Yeah.
Even though everything dies, or from mountains, plants, everything goes through that experience at some point. Somehow we make it a failure.
It's come, I think, from, I think, what's happened, it seems to me, in the last 100, 200, 300 years, is that we have made immense advances in the study of life objectively.
Hmm.
We've looked outwards into our shared world, and we really paid attention to the nature of Mother Nature. We've
Hmm.
studied her in immense detail, and it's led to the internet
Hmm.
and electric lights and amazing things, and
Hmm.
it really has been unbelievable what we've done. Unbelievable. But that's led to a kind of creeping, what I would call objectivism, which goes, reality is really objective, and the
Hmm.
subjective is not really real.
Hmm.
So once you've done that, then you are the body, and consciousness is a side effect. Then obviously there's a feeling of, well, then death is the end of your subjectivity, because the body's died. And once you've done that, then it's like it is a failure, because the
Hmm.
most important thing, the most important thing is it doesn't end. But that's a prejudice of the modern world, which is not justifiable, I feel. That actually the nature of being, of reality which confronts us, is objective and subjective both. And that we need to study it objectively and we need to study it subjectively. And that those people who've done that, I think, come back with something quite different. And one of the great things which I write about, is science, because it's so misunderstood. Because what I see with science is it's completely undermined the whole materialist idea, completely. To the point now where we know that this this hand, which seems to be that I'm touching, which is real in this way,
Hmm.
but actually, we now know that if you go right into it, it is not there. It
Hmm.
is 99 point and then 13 nines, 9%, nothing.
Hmm.
You get an energy field. It's not, and people are starting to call it, maybe it's a hologram, or maybe maybe it's coming from another dimension, all sorts of crazy stuff which scientists can get away with because they're scientists. But it's not there.
Hmm.
Again, it's like, oh yeah, like a dream. It seems to be there, but it's not there. And once you start seeing that the whole materialist idea is not working, it's gone, it's finished, it's old hat, it's 100 years old, it's done, then
Hmm.
the idea of being able to see how the subjective and objective go together opens up. And then these ideas start to, then you can look at the body, for instance, as some of the, as I do, and many of the scientists that I talk with, like I'm doing a conference with them next month, and more like you would a radio.
Hmm.
It's a simple analogy, but it's very powerful. It's a bit like, if you had a radio,
Hmm.
uh, uh, well, right now we are both sitting in music. You can't hear any of it, but we're surrounded by radio waves. It's everywhere. So
Hmm.
there's a beat over there, and there's classical music there, and we can't hear any of it. But we're actually in a sea of music. But if you take a radio and you stick some energy in it and you tune it in, bang, you hear music.
Hmm.
And it would be tempting to go, oh, the music must be in the radio. And you can take the radio spin. It's like, where's the damn music? There's no music here. And that kind of feels like what we've done with the body.
Hmm.
The body is actually like the radio. It is making something which is everywhere conscious.
Hmm.
The field of awareness is conscious through this. Clearly, if you hit this on the head or this goes wrong, it will disappear from this realm. And that's what death is. It's like, the radio, damn, radio is not working anymore. You ain't going to get any more music from this one. But the music hasn't gone anywhere,
Hmm.
because the music was never in the radio. And it's a bit like that with us. But when this goes, you will lose the pleasure of Tim's company. But Tim's not going anywhere because he was never inside the body. It's the other way around. The body was inside Tim, or not in Tim, but the presence of awareness.
Right, like it was just a vehicle.
Yeah, a vehicle to allow this.
Allow this expression.
Let me tell you this one little story. When my little boy was 5 years old, he did this amazing thing, which I wrote down, like I did with a lot of the things they said. He came up to me one day and said, "Dad, what happens when you die?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think happens?" And he stopped for a moment and he said, "I think you cease to exist for other people, but you continue to exist for yourself."
Wow. Wow, he said that at 5.
Yeah, it was a great moment. I just went, wow, that's it. That's got that paradox. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, of course. And it also makes perfect sense to me, everything I know about the paradox of life, that right in the middle of what seems to be the very worst thing for us is the very best thing for the person who's dying. So the near-death experience, again, resonates deeply with me because I think, yeah, that makes sense. We're all here going, oh my God, this terrible loss. The opposite is happening subjectively, that somebody is waking up to this incredible love. And they're both sitting alongside each other.
Yes. It was a wonderful experience when I was sitting with Cody when he was making his transition. It was a 3-day journey, very shamanic journey. And the whole time, it was like what you were talking about with that tear in the fabric. And it was so beautiful and so wonderful to see him just, like, loosening out of that body and just moving into that expanded state of love. And I felt like I was riding that wave with him, And at that time, there was no sense of loss for me.
Right.
It was just, this incredible experience.
Yeah.
And then it was like, that was so beautiful what your son said, that you cease to exist for other people.
Yeah.
But you don't cease to exist.
Yeah. I think, and what that's got for me is that, it's like, we do lose something, don't we? When a loved one dies, it's like, it's the way that, it's like my dad, who I mentioned, or my friends have died recently, a lot of them, and I can't hold their hand. I can't sit down by them. I can't have an argument with them. I can't have a drink with them. I can't, I can't do that. I can tune into a presence which is definitely there, which is actually bigger. I mean, like I said, my experience is I don't see who somebody is until they die. And then I go, oh, right, I see. Wish I'd seen you with that all along. I would have treated you quite differently if I'd seen you with that all along.
But in a way, it kind of forces us to, because then we can have, the relationships with the people that are still in a body, that intimate, we can, share intimate moments and hold hands or have a conversation. And when loved ones go, it kind of forces us to open up to that other frequency.
Yeah.
So that we can still communicate.
Yeah.
Where normally we would be maybe just too busy. Too busy being busy to notice.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And the older you get, the more people you know who are dead.
The more opportunity you have.
There's a lot more, and it's never what you think. I mean, I remember being with a friend of mine called Crispin, who died of cancer not very long ago. And with him, just going in there and sitting by his bedside and him being so thin and translucent, and saying to Crispin, go on, man, you're dying. What's it like? And him very conspiratorially, kind of leaning towards me as best as he could and going, to tell you the truth, Tim, I'm enjoying it. I was like, okay. I'm reminded of Allen Ginsberg on his deathbed said, "I thought I would be terrified, but actually I'm exhilarated."
Mhm.
And you can see that this is this is like anything in life. It's not one experience.
Mhm.
We can all experience it in different ways, and should approach it, I think, with openness, because I also don't feel like it always. I mean, and there's a lot of people spiritual people do preparations for death, and I think that's very
Mhm.
profound, and I respect it. But it worries me as well slightly, because
Mhm.
I feel like one doesn't want to fail at death. You just want to have the death that comes to you.
Mhm.
And if it's easy, that's beautiful. If it's hard, well, it will end. So that we can be just kind to ourselves. I really want us to start being much kinder to ourselves,
Yes.
because it's so easy to give ourselves a hard time about all these things.
And to really be present and enjoy being here while we're here,
Yeah, yeah,
instead of worrying about when we're not.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a both and, isn't it? Just being able to live with both, be able to live with
Mhm.
the knowledge of everything changing and ultimately death, and to engage with the moment just as
Mhm.
it is, as best we can.
Yeah. Good. Well, I know we have one question. Would you like to take that now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, Mike, did Craig want to ask it himself, or I guess we'll let.
There was no mention of that, no.
Okay. Did you? Then this is Craig's question. Hi, Tim. I faced death 3 times with a blocked artery over the past 10, and on each occasion was given the gift of awareness. However, the last few months I have been filled with anger and resentment. I am wondering why I chose to focus on the outright lies of government and corporate media and not on the beauty of nature or a child's smile. Jesus said, as you seek, you reach a point where life is troubling. Perhaps this is the point I am at. And can you comment on this?
I can do my best, Craig. Hi. With what you've said there, I mean, yeah. I mean, what strikes me is I can see how transformative, as you're saying, it is to face those life experiences. But there's a point I feel that whenever to become more conscious is constantly humbling in my experience, because you're always seeing where you weren't conscious. It's like I've been thinking now that and as I'm getting older in my 50s, I'm having this experience myself a lot, whereby I thought I wanted to look back on my life and go, yes, well done, Tim. And there's a certain amount I can do with that, I hope. But there's an awful lot I look back and think, oh my God, if only I'd known then what I know now. But what's interesting is, like, if I want to know more, I need that experience will keep increasing. And the more I wake up and the more I see, the more I will look back and go, God, was I unconscious or what? So that the humility, which is very central in all spiritual traditions, is actually unavoidable. And the willingness to embrace it is part of what it is to wake up and become more conscious. So to look back and go, why did I do that? Or why was I embroiled in that? Or that troubles me. And that lovely quote which you're referring to in the Gospel of Thomas, it's the versions in there says, "Seek and you will become troubled," as you say. If you seek, you will become troubled. And then eventually it leads on to the point where you will rule over the all. You will transcend all things. But the first thing is, yes, you will be troubled. And I think that's right, because when we're like this, we do that to numb ourselves down from all the things which could trouble us, to get ourselves through. And then when you do get blown open through life's experiences or through your own choice, it's troubling. And life is troubling. I mean, it is. There's a lot to trouble us about everything. So to see that and then to keep going. And that indignation and that anger, these are all part of the journey. I feel like we shouldn't ignore them. We should be, I mean, I honor you for just saying it and just being like, this is what I'm experiencing. because that's how I try to be. Just going to, oh, this is what I'm experiencing, and then it's going to lead somewhere, and be authentic with it, but just keep going, just not to get stuck in something. That's where it feels we can lose our way, is when we just get stuck in it. But as long as we keep going through it, then it leads somewhere.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have one more question, and this one is from Zena. She's loving this, and she's not sure if this is relevant, but here's her question. Her son, to her, is caught through his Christian messianic beliefs, and as a pastor, he preaches it, and as much as a lot of who he is and what he does is rich and beautiful, the threat of that if you don't accept Christ, you will go to hell. To me, in that area, he's a bully and makes me angry that he fills people with what to me is a fear of a God or a punishing God, an unsafe universe, very different from what you refer to as safety. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it's I agree with you. I feel, it always seems a great sadness to me, this whole idea that you find in some forms of Christianity. I don't know if you know this. Zena? Was it Zena? Zena? Hi, just getting your name right.
Zena.
Zena, lovely name. I don't know if you how much you know about me, Zena, but I've written a number of books on Gnostic Christianity, the Jesus Mysteries, Jesus and the Goddess, the Laughing Jesus, and others. And what I try to do in that is bring out what I think is the original form of Christianity, which is about gnosis, about waking up to this deep knowing. And that the whole story is a allegorical myth through which we can understand the teachings. And if you go back to the Gnostics, and we have a lot of literature from the Gnostics, who are what they understand is quite different. They certainly don't see this is something which is going to happen when you die, because they see heaven and hell as states of mind. So if you enter a deep state, it will be heavenly, and if you're in separation, it will be hell. So when we're caught into our separateness in the dream, we're in Hades, we're in hell, we're in the land of shades, and it becomes hellish. The more separate I think I am, the more hellish it becomes. When I wake up to the oneness, I discover the Christ within, and I resurrect. I come back to life. And the word for resurrect in the Greek, which it's written in, is anastasia, and it means also to awaken. So to resurrect is also to awaken. So the message of Christianity, as I've come to understand it, is that you, it's pretty confrontational to the fundamentalists, but that you are the dead Christ. We all are. We are this deep presence which has fallen asleep into this dream, and we're dead to what we really are, and we need to resurrect or awaken to the Atman, to the Buddha nature, to the Christ within. That's the journey. And when we do that, it's heaven. And this whole idea that that it's become that we're going to be tortured. If you don't get it right, you're going to be tortured forever by a God of love. Oh my God, no. No. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's a complete misunderstanding that what we're looking at here is, it's like so many other things. This may be helpful as well, because the message I get is that you're living in sin and you need to repent, and if you do, you go to heaven, and if you don't, you go to hell. Well, let's just look at that whole doctrine a moment. Sin. The word for sin in the Greek is hamartia, and it comes from archery, and it means to miss the point or miss the mark. Oh, you missed the point. So you're living a life in which you're missing the point. You keep aiming for the right thing and you don't hit it. Well, the right thing is love. That's clear. That's the message from Christianity. Love your enemies even. Love everyone. So you're aiming for love and you keep missing. So what do you need to do? You need to repent. Well, what's repentance? Well, it's certainly not getting down on your knees and going, oh, God, please, I've been so awful, don't hit me. Repentance, the word in the Greek is metanoia, and it means to change direction or to change your mind or to change your heart. That's what it means. So you're missing the point, and you need to change direction. If you do change direction, your life and your death will become heavenly, because it will be full of oneness and love, and you'll discover the Christ within you. If you don't, if you carry on missing the point and living as if other things than love were more important than love, then your life will become hellish and separate and full of suffering. That's it. That's it. And it's right here, right now. There's a lovely line, I'll finish with this one, in the Gospel of Thomas, where the disciples are saying to Jesus, when will the kingdom of heaven come? And he says, not by waiting for it. The kingdom of heaven is spread out on the earth, and people just don't see it.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Isn't it? Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't that lovely? It's here.
That is so lovely. Yeah.
Heaven and hell. There's a book, one of the Gnostic texts, it's called the Treatise on the Resurrection, which could be translated the Book of Waking Up. And it's the same thing, the Treatise on the Resurrection. And it says in there, the resurrection that's your personal resurrection, the resurrection of the Christ, or the awakening. The resurrection is not something that happened to someone else in the past, and it's not something which is going to happen to you in the future at the end of time. It says the resurrection is here and now, and if you wake up, if you throw off the what's binding you, you will see that you are already resurrected. You will see that you are already awake. You already are this. You already are the Christ. We all are. We've just fallen asleep, and we need to resurrect.
I like that. We have a couple more questions.
Great.
And the next one is from Andrea, and she's going to ask it herself.
Great.
Okay. So, Andrea, you want to turn your mic on?
I think it's on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Tim. Thank you. Usually I could write my question, but it's a little jumbled. So thank you for letting me speak it directly. I've got 3 Post-it notes drawn from your talk so far, and the first one reads, "The universe is friendly," which is the premise that Byron Katie, the woman I was working with last weekend to do this grief work, takes as a premise, the universe is friendly. And then she asks through inquiry, is it true? And invites us all to say, is it true? You know, don't just take for granted that the universe is friendly. And then something you said reminded me of my background and my knowledge of Japan and Japanese history, and a samurai tradition, a warrior tradition of greeting the day with the phrase, "It's a great day to die," which you entertained as sort of a possibly slightly humorous and brave and ironic approach to each day, to wake up and say, it's a great day to die, let's go for it. And then you said something that really struck me to the core, just your language, when you write that we are blown open by life's experiences. And I feel that I was blown open by the Boston Marathon recently, because I just narrowly crossed the finish line about 15 minutes before the explosions, and I've been in a serious state of post-trauma ever since, and I think I need a 4th Post-it note from you. That I'm still working on it, and I'm doing all right, but not always. The grief comes in waves, and I feel like I've spent 10 days trying to trade places with that little boy, because I wish I could die for him, because it feels like that would be more fair and just. And I don't know why, but I want the universe to be friendly, and I want it to feel friendly. And I just thought maybe you could speak to that, please. Thank you.
Yes, I will try. I will try, Andrea. Well, firstly, let me just reach out and say I really hear what you're saying and how intense that is. Look, here in this play of duality, the universe is friendly and it's not friendly. Here it is beautiful and it is cruel. Here all of the polarities happen. Everything. The most terrible things. The most terrible things are happening right now somewhere. And the most beautiful things. That's the nature of it. It's based on that. It's based on that up and down, in and out, yes and no. The place where you can see the safety is very deep. And it's before all of that. And it doesn't take it away. And the pain of what happened in Boston and what you experience will still be there. It's just that there's something else as well. And I suspect if you look, it is there already. Because if it wasn't, you would fall to pieces. And the thing which is holding you together, which is giving you the strength to make it through the experience and to try and integrate that sort of trauma and being blown open into your life, that is the thing. That thing which is always there and is always still, that deep, perpetual peace is what you've got a finger on it. If you didn't have a finger on it, then you wouldn't be able to go through the experience. And just keep in touch with it, keep faith with it, and go through the experience. And realize that, this survivor's guilt, I think they call it these days, don't they?
That's what it is.
Survivor's guilt. Why me? Why me? Why did I live and them die? My dear friend lost his partner a few years back and had that for years. Why did they go and I live? And I think, that's where it doesn't make any sense in that way, because life isn't just, actually, not in that way. Life is chaotic, and an attempt to find any justice in it. Well, what happens is we want it to be, and then we project it onto it, and then we're desperately disappointed and our hearts ripped out because you just go, well, it's not like that, is it? That's why I loved what you said about the Byron Katie, to question that. Is it? Is it actually? Because then we can see, well, in one way, no, it's not. And the kindness that we long for, we want to see the kindness in the universe, but you know what? The kindness comes through us. We bring the kindness to the universe. That you care. Why should you care? It wasn't you. It wasn't your boy. But you care. Why? Because you are awake enough to care. And the greater thing about being awake enough to care is that you're really present and alive. And the worst thing about it is that right now your heart's breaking because of it. And they come together like all opposites. But to see that this is not, that life doesn't have that logic whereby it's not just, it's not kind. We bring that to it. You bring that to it. And that we can't understand the journey each one makes. We can't understand why, it's a bit like when I was comparing life to a dream, and it's one has to be delicate with these analogies when you're dealing with something as strong and as powerful as what you've experienced. But treading lightly with it. If someone wakes up from a nightmare and someone else wakes up from a most wonderful dream, we sit there and we go, well, that's dreaming. So that in the same way in life, people are having very wildly different experiences right now. But there's a deeper place you can contact where you can go, it's okay. I don't know what that means necessarily. I can't put it into words. I can't, justify that. But there's a deep place where you go underneath. The universe is friendly, despite everything at its depths. It really is, and you need to keep in touch with that to be able to go through the sort of experiences you're having, which I can't imagine what that must be like for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's so lovely to see you. Hello.
Okay, I'll hang up now.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Andrea, for sharing that. That was really, that was, I think we're all holding you. If you're okay with the time, we have one more question from Annie, and she's going to ask herself.
Okay.
Okay. Annie, is your mic on?
I think
Hi,
so.
Annie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Hello, Tim. This has been amazing for me. I have loved every minute of your program tonight. What I wanted to say was that I have a notion of if I think of myself as I was when I was 18, and then think of myself as I was when I was 5 or 45, I am the same person. Although I might not have known so much, and I can look back and think, well, I was silly then, or well, I was quite grown up, or whatever. But I imagine that that's what it is like. The you that you are is
Yeah.
that same person. Does that fit for you?
Absolutely, Annie. Absolutely. I remember, and I think I've written about it more than once and spoken about it many times. I remember vividly when many years ago, a lady coming up to me who was in her 80s. And she came up to me and she said, Tim, what you're saying makes so much more sense the older you get. And I said, really, why is that? And she said, well, I'm in my 80s now, but I'm exactly the same as when I was 18. And that's
Really?
it. You know, it's like
Yes.
there is something which
Yes.
this changes. You know, Tim had, when Tim was 18, he had an afro. It's unthinkable. Whoa, but it's true. I had big curly hair, loads of it. Now I'm bald. You know, Tim has changed. He's getting older, and and my personality's changed, and I've had experiences, and become a bit more world weary and all that stuff. But what I am isn't any different. And what I connect with when I look in your eyes is the same thing that I would have connected if I looked into your eyes when you first opened them.
Yes.
It's that there is something which changes, and then there's something which doesn't. And it's the something which doesn't, which is the still ground. It's the deep self. And here, that's the life dreamer. And here we change and we move. And then there's the stillness.
Wonderful. I love that. The life dreamer. Thank you. Thank
It's a
you.
real pleasure. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you, Tim.
This has been such a wonderfully rich and deep conversation. Thank you so much for being here and for the work you do. And I would like to invite everyone to go to your website, themysteryexperience.com, and subscribe to your newsletter so that you can all stay connected to what you're doing, what your programs are, and what a wonderful opportunity to join the big mystery experience that you were describing.
Yeah, well, I do. Please do, and check out the mystery experience retreats. There's videos there. There's all sorts of stuff which you can have a look at. I just love to be able to explore this together. And what I'm offering is a chance for people who are explorers. See, I have great suspicion of people who've arrived. I want to be with people who are explorers, and I love that. And so the people that come to my events are explorers, and at all types, all different paths, all men and women, young and old, and we can dive into that waking up and that deep love together. And it's a great, great privilege to do that with people.
Wonderful.
Hey, Robert, can I read something before we end? Have we got a minute?
Oh, please, yes.
Can I end off with this? This might be a little bit. We don't want to end with something dark, but because it's not happy, in a way. But I think I came across it when I was preparing for this, and it's in my new book, The Mystery Experience, because it really touched me. And I just wanted to, so as we were talking about life and death, I would read it, and just because it's so full on. It's a letter. And it's a letter written by a novelist. He was also a professor called Jacques Decour. He's French, and he was 32. And he was in prison when he wrote this letter to his family, and he was to be executed by the Nazis for being a part of the resistance in World War II. And he was, in fact, executed the day after he wrote this. And in the middle of all of that, in the world in flames, and himself facing his own death at a very early age, 32, by execution, he wrote this to his friends and family. He said, "Now each of us is preparing to die. We are preparing, thinking about what is to come and what is going to kill us without our being able to do anything to defend ourselves. This is truly the moment for us to remember love. Did we love enough? Did we spend hours a day marveling at other people, being happy together, feeling the value of contact, the weight and the worth of hands, eyes, bodies? Do we yet really know how to devote ourselves to tenderness? Before we pass away in the trembling of an earth without hope, it is time to become entirely and definitively love, tenderness, and friendship, because there is nothing else. We must swear to think of nothing any more but loving, opening our souls and our hands, looking with our best eyes, clasping what we love tightly to ourselves, walking free from anxiety and radiant with affection." So thank you, Jacques, for that message from across the decades.
What a place to be in before his final departure.
So I love that, and I wanted to share it with you because that's what I feel too when I glimpses that's what we want to do this for. That's why I jumped at the opportunity to be part of what you're doing, Robin, and why I wanted to spend this time with everyone, because we need to keep reminding ourselves that at this time we must commit ourselves to love.
Yes.